Okay.
I think it's a long time since you first told me in this very hotel that you were going to start services from Ireland to Los Angeles.
Right.
What has been your experience? Are you happy with the way things have worked out so far?
Well, generally we are happy, but it is taking longer time to develop the market than we expected. Obviously, we are very happy with DAA in Dublin airport. They really support us very well, and it's a very good win-win partnership for both of us. The market from Dublin to Africa is doing very well, beyond our expectation. But the market from Dublin to LA is not as we expected it. It's very good during summer, so it's very seasonal, and in the winter it's a challenge, like for instance February, March, October, November, so it's highly seasonal.
Now, is pre-clearance an issue? Because you've opted not to go for pre-clearance.
Yes.
Is pre-clearance too expensive, really, given the fare and the price points you're in?
No, it's not the cost issue. It is the nature of our passengers that we carry from Africa. They have many bags, and it will be time-taking to bring the bags for customs inspection and then reloading them. But on the other hand, although we assumed in the beginning that the passengers we carry from Addis to Los Angeles will remain in the airplane, but now TSA requires us to get them off and then screen and reboard. That has not been well received by passengers. So that's a challenge.
So is pre-clearance back on the agenda, seeing as you have to take them off?
Yes, yeah, maybe that is what we need to consider in the future, yeah. You're right.
Now, you are also routing aircraft that are going out to other American destinations through Dublin.
Yeah.
Is there an option to pick up passengers down the line in that, or is it too difficult to organise?
No, we have not considered that, because it requires us, if we pick passengers from Dublin to the US, then it requires us also to fly back through Dublin. Right now the flights are flying back direct. They don't make any stop from Washington to Addis.
And realistically, if you had a hub airport that was at a lower altitude, you would really not need Dublin anyway.
Right. That's true.
And is that a long-term plan for Ethiopian?
Well, Ethiopia is a mountainous country, so we may not be able to find a very low altitude airport, but I think maybe we're trying to locate the new airport in a location around 500 meters lower altitude. It helps slightly.
But that's a long-term plan. We're talking 20 years. It's a big, exciting year for you. You have the A350 on the way.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do with that? I just saw you said earlier that Addis is 10 hours flight from 6 billion people.
Yes.
So the A350 must increase all those options for you.
Not really with the altitude. Again, the altitude is a challenge for all airplanes. Slightly an hour or maybe a couple of hours. I would say an hour more from Addis. Because the altitude is still going to be a challenge even for the S350. It's a challenge for the 787. You know, the longest range airplane in the world today is a 200 LR. That's 777-200 LR, but even that couldn't make it to Washington.
Now, what else is happening in 2016? You've been opening bases in Malawi, and you're looking at the west of Africa as well.
Yes, yeah, Central Africa. We are growing up in Western Africa. With ASCAI, we are putting more airplanes, so a lot of expansion going on. And Malawi is also growing. but we are looking for somewhere in the DRC or in the region. Either we open a new hub or we develop Rwanda, because we are discussing strategic cooperation.
You're very, very brave in a very an area which has seen a lot of disturbance. That doesn't seem to, you don't seem to balk at those sort of issues.
Well, it's when you want to do something, there are always obstacles, there are always constraints in any part of life. So we just have to take the constraints as given. It's a very challenging environment.
You're on the record as saying that it's very difficult to deal with the regulatory environment in Africa.
Right.
A single African sky, is there any chance we'll see that in our lifetime? Is it a long, long way off? Or is there any progress that you see?
I wouldn't put it that way. It has been a challenge. We have what we call the Yamoussoukro Declaration, a declaration that was signed in Yamoussoukro, Cote d'Ivoire, 20 years ago. It was not fully implemented. We're not happy about that. But now with a renewed initiative from the African Union, we want that to be done in 2016. 11 countries have already signed. So we expect the other countries to follow suit. So I think that has to be done fairly quickly. The most difficult one would be like forming a bloc, an aviation bloc like the European Union. Because in the European Union you have the community clause. They call it community clause, meaning one country in the European Union, when it is negotiating with another country outside the European Union, de facto it represents the European Union. So we want to do the same in the continent of Africa.
A lot of governments would like to see their flag on their own airline. We've seen people like the DR Congo trying to restart airlines. Is that really the wrong way to go about it? Is the future a big regional carrier like yourself?
I would say that because it's not people liking to do something, or it's not of course everyone wants to see the flag on the tail of an aircraft, but the reality is quite different, because the airline business is volume driven. It needs a critical mass, volume of traffic, volume of flights, volume of number of airplanes, because as the volume grows, the unit cost comes down, because this is an industry highly capital intensive and highly labor intensive. So you buy or you lease an airplane, so you have to keep the airplane for at least 14 or 15 hours a day on the air to make money. In order to do that, you need a network to engage the airplane. You need a traffic base. You need a market base. So it's not going to work for every small country trying to form an airline. I think what's more economically practical is a group of countries owning and operating a large airline.
Now in West Africa we had a plethora of airlines, but there are countries that don't have their national airline. Yeah. You see a lot of opportunity to grow business there?
Yes, that's exactly what we did with Askai. Askai is based in Togo, but it's a regional carrier. It didn't say Togo Airline. It's Askai. Askai stands for African Sky. So it's a Pan-African airline serving the sub-region in West Africa, 22 countries for that matter, and owned by Ethiopian Airlines and the Ecowas Development Bank and the Francophone African Development Bank and Ecobank. So it has nothing, no government involvement. So it's going to be a purely private initiative. It is already, and that's why it's succeeding. So I think we need to see more and more of this kind in the continent.
You have more than 50 aircraft on order. Where are the passengers for those aircraft going to come from?
Mainly the line that I draw in my presentation: China, India, Africa, Brazil. This is now the fastest trade lane in the world, the fastest growing trade lane. It's a new trade lane because, as you know, historically the trade lanes that we had before was north-south, but now this is east-west. So we're going to see a lot of growth, a lot of traffic generated in these emerging economies, particularly between China and Africa, and India and Africa. Although the Brazilian economy is really struggling today, but it's an economic cycle. It will come back. So most of our growth is in this region, but again we are also going to grow equally in the U.S. Today we fly to Washington and Los Angeles. New York is coming in June. We're also starting Chicago, Houston. So we have quite exciting destinations to expand.
And if you could do one thing to change the nature of Africa and aviation in Africa, what would it be? Would it be to break down those regulatory environments?
I would say that Africa is in its early stage of development. Let's put it this way: it's an underdeveloped continent. It's underdeveloped on the ground, whether it is road transport or rail transport. So the only viable means of transport for people and goods to move around today is air. That being the case, aviation is not given the attention it deserves. So unless and until governments think that aviation is a strategic asset in their economic development agenda, then aviation is not to grow as much as expected. So I would like to see governments in their socio-economic development agenda of their nations to put aviation as a strategic asset driving economic development. Government has to stop thinking that aviation is a rich man's means of transport. That's not the case. Whether you are poor or rich, if you want to travel from country A to country B in Africa today, the only means is aviation. But if you are the average person in Africa today, you cannot afford to travel by air because it's expensive. Why is it expensive? Because infrastructure is very expensive, fuel is very expensive, taxation is insane. So I think governments have to really encourage the sector.
Now, if you had that deregulation, would you have low-cost carriers coming in and stealing the market that you've grown and developed?
I have always been critical of low-cost carriers in Africa cross-border. Low-cost carriers in Africa can work and are working in the national borders of South Africa. They can also work in Nigeria, big country, or Egypt or Morocco. They are already working. But cross-border engagement of low-cost carriers as it stands today is not feasible. FastJet is few years in service, but they have not made money. They're still losing money. And I don't know how long they can continue to lose money.